All right. Well, I'm here with a new person I'm getting to know, Christine Valters Paintner, and she has a new book out, and that's why I reached out to you. The book title is Breath Prayer, an Ancient Practice for the Everyday Sacred. So it's a beautiful book, both on the outside and the inside, and I'll highlight some of those things. But I just wanted to share a little bit for the people who are listening to this so they can get to know you. The reason why I reached out to you, Christine, is because of who you are. I've followed your website for years now. I introduced by a friend, Fanny, and when I looked at your about page, I really loved it, and I'm like, I was inspired. Like, I want to kind of enhance my about page because I really enjoyed yours. Just you start with three identities I currently hold dear: poet, hermit, mystic. And I love those. And then I just want to say you write beautifully your biography, your three, like you have some core things that you believe. And I just want to highlight a couple of them. I believe in the revolutionary power of stillness and spaciousness. I believe in radical hospitality. I believe, along with the great writer Dostoevsky, that beauty will save the world. And then I believe that all of this life is an ever unfolding journey. I start there because that reveals your person, who you are. For those people who are interested, she has done her credentials in spiritual formation, spiritual direction, bachelor's, master's, PhD, all those things. It's all there. But that's not why I'm talking to you. I'm saying that because sometimes that sparks people's interest. And I want them to get to know you because, my wife and I have master's degree in marriage and family therapy, but that's secondary to if you've done your inner homework. And from what I can tell, I don't know you personally, you have and are doing your inner homework. And that's why I want to talk to you. I want to talk to people who are on that journey. I want our conversation to inspire other people into that way of life. And so thanks for being here. And I'm interested, just start with this book. What inspired you to write this book?
Well, this particular book I was actually invited to write by Broadleaf Books. There's an editor there that I've known for many, many years, and she's wanted me to write for them for some time. And she actually shared a book with me written by Thich Nhat Hanh about the Buddhist practice of gathas. I'm not sure if I'm saying that quite right, but breath prayer being a integral part of Buddhism as well. And she wondered if I'd be interested in writing this from a more Christian perspective. So, and having a great love of the desert mothers and fathers and that tradition, and great love of spiritual practice in general, and particularly contemplative practices. And I've loved the practice of breath prayer for many years. But sometimes I get an invitation to do something that I wouldn't necessarily have initiated myself, but it always takes me on a beautiful journey of deepening my own practice and understanding and all of that. So so that's kind of how the book came into being.
That's really cool. And I there's a couple of quotes I want to just read from it because it talks about your intention in it. And so it's wonderful that we get invited into those types of things. And on page 7, you write about your intention. The intention and focus throughout this book is not on saying each prayer correctly or perfectly each time, but on letting words open your heart to a deeper intention in daily living. We work on the words, but the words work on us as well. Eventually, you might discover that you are not so much reciting the prayers reciting you, guiding you, opening your heart to a devotion to the world. Wonderful. And then I just wanted to build off of that you have a sentence on page 13 is, each inhale and exhale becomes a portal to divine presence and inner stillness. I like that so much because I always want to find ways or practices, rhythms that enable people to know God is present, God is with us, and in a way that we can be with others and with the world. And so the breath prayer is, I think, one of the simplest, easiest ways of introducing and inviting people into that. So my background, I come from a non-denominational church. Now we're at a local Nazarene church, but my wife and I consider ourselves contemplative therapists. I know your background is a little bit different, but can you just share about your journey? And because I want people to learn from you. And so how do you integrate breath prayer as a part of your larger story?
Mhm. Well, the monastic path has always called to me. I'm a Benedictine oblate, which means that I'm a lay person who has made a commitment to a Benedictine community.
Mm.
There's one in the Pacific Northwest that I'm connected to, and between that Benedictine path, between the desert path, that early Christian, longing and desire for that radical sense of solitude and intimacy with the divine, and then the Celtic monastic path as well. Obviously, having lived in Ireland now for 10 years,
10 years.
that Celtic way has really shaped my worldview. And so I think, an Abbey of the Arts, this a virtual monastery that my husband and I shepherd and run, is really about bringing people the gift of different contemplative practices and ways of being in the world that help to cultivate a sense of presence to the divine. I like to say that Benedict believed, that the sacred was present in all things, in all people, and in all moments. And he talks about in the rule that the things, the kitchen utensils, are just as holy as the items of the altar. And he talks about welcoming the stranger at the door as the face of Christ. So even the person that's the strangest to us. And then, of course, the whole liturgy of the hours and returning to pray, throughout the day. And so breath prayer is one way, but I think a really effective way of helping us to return our attention to that reality over and over and over again. The reality that God or the divine, or however you want to name that in your life, that there is a sacred presence that is with us every moment of the day. It's our attention that wanders, not the sacred.
Yes.
And so breath prayer, because we're continuously breathing, and breath can be a beautiful way to direct our attention and our focus. So this ancient practice of connecting a word or a phrase to the inhale and the exhale is a really beautiful, simple way to remember. I think it's like an act of remembering, of bringing ourselves fully present, of helping let go of all the things that distract us or pull us in different directions, and to keep coming back and back, to what the desert monks would have called the cave of the heart, or the place where the divine dwells in each of us.
Thank you for sharing. I'm thinking like, I just want to ask a question and then just let you talk for a long time, because I really think you add value when you're speaking. And so thank you for sharing that. And I'm even thinking about how breath is one of the intersections of, we breathe without thinking. It's a beauty, it's a gift of our body. And we can also intentionally breathe. So we can do it automatically or intentionally. And then it can shift your whole physiological state of mind. And if we connect, build a bridge with scripture, like integrate some Lectio in there. Or when I was reading this, I was drawn to the part of a character of God. And so I was just saying a character of God for a week. And it was very anchoring. I was doing Sophia because I wanted wisdom. And that was like just Sophia in and Sophia out. And that was so powerful, and it's so simple because in the tradition I grew up in, and probably most people listening, there's a lot of doing to feel
Mm-hmm.
connected to God, which I think is part of a human. It's part of being human. It's how
Mm-hmm.
we can grow. But just if people can relax into the communion, I don't know. It's finding those words, which I think you're so good at, and the breath prayer can be helpful. It's just I wanted to just because people don't have the book or they might not. How did you decide how to organize it? And I wanted to say, so you have big categories, and I'm looking at the categories and reading it, and then I was surprised, and it made me laugh. Where is it? I mean, just so example, people have like there's like the grace of daily tasks: showering, getting dressed, washing dishes, reading the news, working on the computer. And here's the one that made me laugh: holding a dog or cat in your lap. Like it's great. I love it, but that's not one that I would have expected. That's why I laughed. So how did you come up with them and categorize them?
Well, that last one that you mentioned, that's one of my favorite times of meditation. I don't, hopefully you can't, my dog is sitting in here with me and she's scratching herself. So I'm hoping you
Oh,
can't
well,
hear
no,
too
I
much.
can't, but your dog is welcome to join the podcast.
Yeah, she's very much a little soul friend to me. But one of my favorite times of meditation is particularly in the morning, when we first get up and get my coffee or my tea and sit with her, and that sense of communion with the creature, with her, I mean, I just marvel every day at her presence to me and her delight and
Mm,
joy and being, alive and all of that. So I'd say for the book, in terms of the topics that I was
mm,
thinking, I I just kind of, I wrote this really as the pandemic hit and
mm,
as lockdown. We had a pretty big serious lockdown here, and so these ordinary daily tasks were really
mm.
the entirety of my focus, other
Yes.
than my work. It's like all of those ordinary things became more textured, more
Mm,
alive, because it was what, yeah, it was sort of like this invitation into
yeah.
those ordinary moments. So it was a matter of paying attention to,
Mm,
for me, or what are the portals into this sacred awareness? What are the moments when, either like holding a dog in my lap, when it's a natural gateway for me,
mm,
or the one that comes right after, balancing your finances, is not a natural gateway for me to be contemplating the sacred. And yet, I realize that there's such an opportunity for gratitude when I'm doing
mm.
that. The fact that I have any finances at all to be, working on my taxes is
Yes.
definitely an opportunity for gratitude, and just, and to think about how the taxes go to support, this community that I
Mm,
care about and all of
yeah.
that. So it's those kinds of ordinary tasks. And then sanctifying time is,
Mm,
for me, again, about that monastic rhythm, and thinking about those moments during the day or at night when um, there's an invitation into like that threshold space to
mm,
pay closer attention. And then I think the last section was kind of more, maybe things that didn't necessarily happen every day, but I have one on extinction anxiety,
mm,
which, I think a lot of us, fear for what's
mm,
happening to this earth. And
mm.
but then there's also, for on a rainy day or a sunny day or in the midst of grief. So those are things that aren't necessarily like the daily ordinary
Right.
tasks, but might be but a moment when there's an opportunity to
Mm,
pray instead
mm.
of, or maybe our ordinary response to
Yes.
those kinds
Yes.
of moments.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, that's wonderful. So you have the ordinary moments, and then you have the, well, existential moments, and as well
Yeah.
as kind of periodic ones. And since I was reading this, I'll relate to another one that I think we all have. I was on with a company with customer service for 87 minutes.
Oh
And
God.
that day, I talked to 7 people.
Hmm.
And I just used it as a time of prayer, and like, and it was
Mm-hmm.
really helpful, I mean, and it flowed, and sometimes it flows and sometimes it doesn't, but that day I just had a practice to reorient, and then to even
Yeah.
bless each person. I tried
Yeah,
to I
exactly.
tried to be, and I did. I intended to be a blessing to them, and
Mm-hmm.
it was that made it kind of fun. It made it a game, like to be
Mm-hmm.
present to them in a joyful way. And the breath prayer was a helpful sort, because it sort of was shaping me for the week in preparation for this. So
Lovely, lovely.
thank you.
Yeah.
Could
Yeah, no,
you?
definitely waiting are definitely those
Oh my
moments
gosh.
when we
Yes.
can transform our consciousness into a different way of being in relationship to what's happening.
And well, the first book that I read that really like struck me and like it opened a whole new world. I think I was in my early 20s, was Brother Lawrence, Practicing the Presence of God, which is kind of,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
you were referencing like the kitchen, like that's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
as prayerful as a
Mm-hmm.
specific prayer time. And so this book was like, just echoed it for me, or maybe like a practical way that people can
Mm-hmm.
enter into it if that's not our common way. I was wondering if you could introduce a simple breath prayer for people who haven't done it. And then actually one of the first, we've been just doing this podcast for a year. One of the first series, we did a couple of breath prayers in the way that I knew it. And so, but it's been
Mm-hmm.
over a year, and I would love to have them hear you introduce breath prayer, and maybe a simple one, whatever you feel led to share this day.
Yeah. I'm happy to do that. I think, yeah, I think I'll do invite a breath prayer in one of the scriptures. Um, uh, I'm thinking of the Psalm, the line from the Psalm, "Be still and know that I am God."
Mm-hmm.
And so when we sit down for a breath prayer, we can, like this book offers, all kinds of suggestions for particular breath prayers. But ultimately, the last chapter invites people to come up with their own, whether you draw it from scripture or whether you draw it from a poem or just a line that comes to you. So to know that there's a lot of freedom in whatever the breath prayer
Yes.
is that you want to pray with. And then the idea is to slow yourself down, to get in touch with your breath, to feel the spaciousness that the breath can create in our bodies, in our hearts, and to even drop your awareness down to your heart center, to that cave of the heart.
Mm.
And to spend a few moments just listening there, just being. So, in the presence of that divine spark that the mystics tell us is in our hearts, that we don't have to do anything to be in that presence. So, that's one of the gifts. And then to decide on the prayer that we're going to offer. It could be something, connected to an activity that you're part of, or it could be connected to a desire that you have. I'm suggesting that we take this line from the Psalm, "Be still and know that I am God." And so as you inhale, just to say to yourself silently, "Be still and know." And as you exhale, that I am God. And as you inhale, "Be still and know." And as you exhale, that I am God. And to just gently repeat that for a few breath cycles, seeing if you can both let that be a verbal prayer, but also a prayer of the body, so that be still and know, what do I feel in my body? Can I feel like a stillness? Can I invite that stillness? That I am God. Can I feel that exhale, that release, that surrender, that yielding into that divine presence, that divine holding of me? And so that inhale and then exhale. And the idea is to just to sit with that prayer, to breathe it in, to breathe it out. We can practice breath prayer as part of like a formal meditation, but you could also do it when you're on hold with the, electric company
Mhm.
or while you're washing dishes. And the idea is that it becomes an anchor for your awareness, for your presence to this moment, to remember that sacred presence here right now. And then just breathing that in and breathing that out. And then even letting go of the words for a moment and coming back just to the body sensation, that stillness, and that sense of God's embrace. And then just letting the breath carry you back to the space that you're in. And just take a moment even to notice, what effect does that breathing have on you, that the words that draw you deeper, the felt sense in your body, even to take, 5 seconds just to notice what impact that prayer has on your being. And then to know that you can pick up that thread during the day. I find it helpful for me in the morning to practice some breath prayer. And then during the day, there'll be moments that kind of find me. Sometimes it'll be intentional that I set out to do this prayer, but sometimes it'll be, oh, all of a sudden something I'll be having an experience and I'll realize that's a perfect moment to call in that breath prayer as the support. So
Thank you. I didn't want to step on anything because I know if it wasn't a podcast, we could just sit in silence and
yeah,
linger
yeah.
there. So if you want to pause the podcast, you
Mhm.
can. But and it's so nice to be led into it. So thank you for that gift to me, because I'm generally the one leading people into it. But it's just nice, and you have your flavor and texture, and I really appreciate it. And even as I was doing the breath prayer, I really engaged it, thinking about this weekend. It's pretty full, and just I felt grounded, and like there's an expansiveness. Okay, I
Mhm.
can carry into this weekend this presence and awareness of the divine. And I think
Beautiful.
that's my particular experience, but I think that is a general thing that happens when we can slow down and notice that and enter into that.
Yeah, can give us a little taste of that sort of time outside of time
Yeah,
where we don't feel the rush and pressure of everyday
right.
life. Yeah,
So thank you.
you're
And I
welcome.
really do hope people check out the book, because it's just my wife and I have a ministry called Presence and Practice.
Mhm.
And so we start with the divine presence, and that exists before us, ahead of us, through us, in us. And then look, we want to provide practices and ways. And breath prayer is one of our easiest entry points that we share with people. And so when I saw this book coming, I'm like, oh, I have to reach out, and I'm excited. There's a tool, and people learn through podcasts or videos or books. And so I want to share with the world this simple tool, and all the ways you have are just reminders or pointers, like whatever, take any moment of your life and day, and you can make it a breath prayer and design it. And that's what I like. At the very end, you give some ideas on how to do it, and you kind of verbally shared it here. I wanted to switch and just sort of like end with, because I love the your Abbey of the Arts, which I'm so sorry I didn't get to say that you're the abbess, and which I love that you have this. You're like distant mentor to model ways of inviting people into this, and so we're like brothers and sisters in this journey. And you have this holy disorder of dancing monks, which is just a delightful thing to say in itself. just those words arranged in that order is fun. I want a holy disorder of dancing monks. Okay, Christine, tell me about this. You know what I mean? Like, that's a fun, I don't think I've ever said it before. I mean, when I read your website, I'm like, oh, this is cool, but those, I've never seen those words together in that way. Why this? Why those words? What's the value? What's the meaning? Like, draw people in, because I think it's awesome.
Well, our work in contemplative practice is integrated with creative arts, and movement has always been an important part. Embodied awareness. I have a book about wisdom of the body, and I feel like I know for myself, as someone who can get very much in my head, that focusing on the body has been really important. And I have been blessed to have a couple of wonderful colleagues who are dancers and movement practitioners. And that's been a real enrichment in my life. And several years ago, it was actually just before we moved to Europe, I led a retreat in the Pacific Northwest it was a writing and dance retreat. So because I discovered for myself as a writer, writing is my primary passion, that my writing would come alive in a different way when I would take breaks to dance or take breaks to be present to my body, that it would give, a different kind of something to my writing.
Yes.
So I led this retreat, which was some fun. And towards the end, someone in the group said, we're not an order like a monastic order, we're a disorder. And I said, oh, that's perfect. That's so perfect, because I'm not someone who's, very linear, or I mean, I love the rule of Benedict, but I'm not particularly interested in giving other people a rule to follow. And so I thought, no, we're a holy disorder, which means that we have this commitment to a way of being in the world that also makes room for the playfulness, the spontaneity that dance can bring. And dancing monks is just an image that makes me smile. We actually have a whole series of icons that we commissioned from an artist in Ohio, and they're basically all these, saints and mystics that we're familiar with, but they're depicted in full color and barefoot and dancing. They're all barefoot and dancing. And because there's one of the principles in our monk manifesto, which is kind of the closest thing we have to a rule, is the principle of creative joy, and that idea that we make room for that delight that comes when we bring spaciousness into our days. We make presence for, that divine, that awareness of the divine. So yeah, that's kind of how it all came about, and it sort of sums up what we're about.
I love it. And I did see those icons on your store of the dancing monks. Maybe I'll pick that up for our family for Christmas, to just to have focusing our attention on something delightful and joyful. And I hope I could have you on again, like the wisdom of the body as a therapist. I'm like, oh, there, and so much integration. And it's just like I'm sparkling inside. So I listened to another podcast that you were on, and you said a term that I really liked, and I just wanted to kind of you talked about contemplative partnership, because you were answering a question about how you and your husband kind of discerned when to move and how to move, and all that journey moving from like the Northwest to Europe and jobs and all that stuff, big stuff.
Yeah.
And my wife and I we're contemplative. I mean, I think everybody is if we're active, but we intentionally want to be and invite our kids into it. But if you could just draw some words out and paint some picture of what a contemplative partnership looks like, because I want to hold that up for the world to see this is a possibility.
Yeah, well, my husband and I are both, introverts, and both certainly more inclined in the contemplative direction. We both really like a lot of quiet time. We obviously live in the same home together, but we work together, but we give each other a lot of space, which I think is important in any relationship. And we've always supported whatever crazy dreams either one of us might have.
Hmm.
So I think that for me, there's a sense of, there's a lot of ways that we come together and our work, we work together really well and all of that. But there are also, aspects of our interests that are different, and
Hmm.
but that help to nourish each of our creativity. And so part of the contemplative partnership for me is like giving each other enough room
Hmm.
to keep growing in ways that may not be like, completely reflective of my interests. For instance,
Hmm.
my husband is involved a lot in theater and film,
Hmm.
and there's a very active community here in Galway. And so, to see his creative aliveness,
Hmm.
get sparked through that kind of work. Yeah, and just, I think that's part of, we've been fortunate that we've, in the big decisions of our lives, we've been aligned. And I think it's because we're both committed to listening, and thankfully Spirit seems to have been whispering the same messages to
Yes,
both
yes.
of
So
us. So
space, interest, listening are components of this contemplative partnership. And
yeah, yeah. Maybe
yeah,
one day I'll write another book on that and break that open even more.
do it. And then we can have another conversation on podcast. And yeah, no, contemplative partnership. I really think I mean, it's not limited to marriage, but that marriage is a very, in a therapeutic world, they call it the crucible. And
Yeah,
there's a holding and an intensity there. And so if
yeah,
it can be practiced
absolutely.
there, it can probably be practiced other places too. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah. I would think friends, any close friendship would
yeah,
be
deep
part of
friendships.
that.
And so, well,
Yeah.
Christine, thanks so much. And I was wondering if, as a way of ending our time together, if you had a blessing, that you could give the people listening, that whatever is from in your heart today.
Well, let me think.
And I did not prep you. I just so you
Yeah.
could be so sorry if that's something that you'd appreciate, but just from the heart.
Yeah, yeah. No, I just need a moment to kind of breathe into it. And so just invite anyone listening to take a couple of nice deep breaths and to really listen for the ways that the holy, the sacred is speaking in the depths of your heart. And my wish, my hope, my blessing is that in these times that feel especially challenging, when there's so much struggle going on, that we take these moments of breath, of spaciousness, as ways to really um, create that openness, that doorway into new creative possibilities, which I believe only come when we slow down, when we make the room, and when we open to Spirit's work in our lives. So may each one of you become a creative vessel and offer your gifts into this world that is in so much need of it.
I agree. Amen. Amen.
Amen.